Hey folks, how's everybody doing today? Gonna give people another 30 seconds or so to join in and then we'll get started. But we got some fun stuff today. We're gonna do what we talked about. We're gonna go through, I'm gonna run through that PCAP file that I left for everybody. Hopefully you had time to go through and do a threat hunt on it. If not, you can kind of follow along with what I did and maybe go back and kind of mimic that later. But I'm gonna leave some time at the end. John Strand, who is one of the co-founders at Active Countermeasures, also runs Black Hills Information Systems. They have an awesome webcast series. If you haven't ever attended it, you really should. Some really good info, but he's doing one tomorrow on Sysmon and App Locker. And him and I talked about having him jump on at the end of this to talk through some of the Sysmon stuff and how that can be leveraged to go through and do threat hunting. So pretty excited about that. So we should have John jump in as we go through. But with that said, hey, let's go in and just get started. So we'll do a quick review. I'm going to walk through the analysis of that lab. And like I said, with any luck, we'll be doing some Sysmon stuff at the very end. So I gave you this link last week. And in fact, let me, just in case there's anybody here that didn't get it last week, I'm going to throw this into chat so that everybody has it now. There we go. So that is a 3 gigabyte PCAP file that is a collection of traffic over a 24-hour period of time. And what I asked folks was, hey, take a look in that PCAP file and see if you can identify any C2 traffic. There's a lot of weird things in there. Some of the weirdness is there just to kind of be a distractor, but it's normal weirdness you might see on a network. And then there's other stuff going on that, oh yeah, that's something you need to make sure you go in and pay attention to. But my reasoning for giving you this was twofold. Well, a couplefold actually. One was to, we've talked about this process a lot over the last 6 weeks. So this gives you an opportunity to go through, start vetting that process, start figuring out how are we going to do this in our own internal environment. In other words, pretend this PCAP came out of your environment. What steps would you take to threat hunt it to identify, are any of my internal systems compromised, yes or no? It can be really hard to find decent data to do that, especially with, excuse me, with positive hits in it, meaning, yeah, there's actually C2 channels you can go in and detect if you have the right tools. So I wanted to, provide that as a possibility for everybody. So hopefully you had time to go through it, but let's take a run through it now. So I wanted to start with a sanity check though, which was, for years we've been using signature paste, intrusion detection, intrusion prevention. It's kind of normal to fall back to that. So I decided, well, let's start with that. In other words, for most folks, this would be the first tool they pull out of their toolkit. I've got a PCAP file. I think there's interesting stuff in it. Let me run it through a tool that normally identifies all the interesting stuff. So I ran it through Suricata. Suricata has some really great rules to it. It's kept up to date. It's a fast tool, but can you use it for identifying C2 traffic? That's kind of the big question here. So when I took this PCAP and I ran it through, it flagged, it generated thousands of log entries, but there was really only 3 unique variations that were getting popped up, and 2 of them were actually related to each other. So these first 2 circles you see here, this is Microsoft device metadata. So this is when you plug a new USB into your system, or you hook up a new printer or a new monitor or something, and your Windows box says, oh, hey, you need a driver for that. Do you want me to check on the internet? When you say yes, it goes off and it does a check for that. So that's what's taking place here. So Suricata went through and said, this could be interesting. And it could be interesting. If you're in an environment where people aren't supposed to be plugging in new hardware, the fact that a system is looking for drivers for new hardware might be interesting to you. Is it indicative of command and control though? Yeah, no, not really. The third thing it flagged is this big circle down here. What it's saying is, hey, I'm seeing people making queries for the .cc top level domain. That could be suspicious. And the thought process there is, excuse me, I may go out and try and register, Microsoft.cc, and someone looking at that might think it says Microsoft.com. I might be able to fool them into coming to a site that they don't realize they're at. That is the concern. The reality is all the good .com domains are gone. So .cc, .co gets used by an awful lot of startups these days, so it could very well be legitimate traffic. So the first two rules kind of make sense to me. The third one, yeah, you're kind of stretching with that one. But actually, you know, to go back to where we started, command and control. So Suricata, even with the advanced persistent threat rule set, still doesn't detect anything in this file as being C2 traffic. So, you know, does this help us here? Well, it gave us some interesting information, but it's kind of a fail from a C2 perspective. So, okay, so we got that out of the way. So where do we start? Where do we go from here? Well, remember our process. Step one, identify, is there any persistent communications taking place? So that needs to be the first thing we go through and do. And then after that, we can analyze the protocol that's being used. We can take a look at the reputation of the endpoints, and we can, you know, further dig down into our threat hunt from there. But it needs to start with identifying who has persistent connections going on. So how do I go through and do that? Well, I'm going to talk about a couple of tools here. I've talked about Zeek a lot, and I like Zeek because Zeek is great for, it's not signature based. Zeek is good for, here's all the stuff that might be interesting from a security perspective, and I'm going to break it out into a bunch of different log files for you. Zeek's kind of cool for that. And you can write your own scripts. There's all sorts of cool stuff you can do. I can easily turn this into a Zeek class. But what I did is I went through the con.log file. So the con.log file is just, it identifies all the sessions that the Zeek box saw. And I'm catting that file. So it's just listing out the contents. I'm running it through BroCut. I talked about that tool before. So what BroCut allows me to do is to extract out only the fields I find interesting. So there's probably 20 to 25 data points per line entry in that con.log file, but there's only like 3 of them I want to pay attention to here. So I'm using BroCut to say, show me the source IP, show me the destination IP, and then show me the destination port that was being used. So imagine in your head, I've got this con.log file. BroCut's going to step through every line, extract out those 3 bits of information only, and then it's going to pass it to sort. So what sort's going to do is sort's going to go through and it's going to sort everything by source IP address first, and then all the targets that source it talked to, it'll go through and it'll sort through those as well. So I'm going to kind of line up all the communications that are in common between source and destination IP that took place over my perimeter. Then I'm saying run it through unique C. So I'm saying only show me the first instance, and I want to count how often that instance was seen. So for example, this first line here, 192.168.88.2, talking to 165.227.88.15 on port 53, how many times did you see that? And it produces this number here. Then I just ran it through sort again, -RN, so I want to do it as a numeric. I want to sort it numerically. -R says reverse order, show me the largest number first. So what this is doing is and then head-5 says just show me 5 lines of output. So what this script here is doing is it's just saying, show me my top 5 talkers that you saw. That's it. Now we would like to do a beacon analysis. We'd like to see, hey, does it look like communications between those systems are programmed? Are they taking place on a regular basis? That's the type of analysis we really want to be doing. It's hard. It's really hard to go through and do that. I talked about some possibilities back on, I think it was the 3rd class, where I talked about using our statistics tool to be able to go through and do that. So we could go down that deep rabbit hole, and I've covered that already. But what I wanted to show is that a lot of the in the wild malicious command and control, so not things being used by red teams, because those tend to be a higher level of C2 software, but the typical bad stuff that's out there tends to be very noisy. So if you go in and you look for who's generating a ton of connections, start at the top and work your way through that, work your way down, you're most likely going to find some of those are probably C2. You know, this is something that's actually worth going in and paying attention to. Now, if you do another level check to see does it have beacon characteristics to it, that may weed out some of the connections that you don't have to pay attention to them anymore. Now, when I did this, I actually identified the destination port here. And I did it more as a reference for us to be able to say, okay, there's 108,000 connections between these two IP addresses using DNS. So, hey, let's go dig down on the DNS to find out what those things were about. Normally, when I was going in and seeing who did the most talking, I would not include the port parameter there. And the reason for that is we have seen C2 traffic in the wild that jumps ports. So it may actually connect to 100 or more different target ports on the command and control server. So if I go through and I used to do my sort this way, if it's talking to 100 or 1,000 ports, well, now the amount of traffic I'm seeing isn't that much. If I go in and I do my first pass saying, I don't care about port, I don't care about transport, I just want to see number of connections between these systems only, that makes it a whole lot easier to go in and tag it. And then maybe as a second pass, I go in and I look at what ports are being used. So I did it here. That doesn't necessarily mean you should do it all the time. But here's our top 5. Now notice we've got some focus here. This is all DNS traffic. This is HTTPS, so SSL, TLS, and then TCP/80, of course, is HTTP. So that's our beacony type traffic. Now we also want to take a look at long connections. Well, I can pull that out of the con log in Bro as well. I can go in. I can go in and I can say Bro cut, show me duration. So duration is just, hey, between the SYN packet and the FIN packet, or the first packet and the last packet in the session, how long did this session take place? Now, this gets a little funky when we get into UDP because UDP is connectionless. There's no SYN or FIN flag to go look for to identify when's the start and the end of the connection. So what Zeek does to get around that is it looks at source port, destination port, and it sets a timer. So if it sees a packet go by from a specific source port, let's call it 2000, just to throw a port out there, and it's going to a target port, let's call it 53, just to throw a port number out there, and then it sees another packet using that same port combination within a 30-second period of time, that's considered part of the same session. So you may actually see, if you go in and run this in your own network, you may actually see UDP traffic show up in here in your long connections fields and say, well, wait a minute, UDP is connectionless. How can it be a long connection? Well, that's why. Because Zeek goes in and just says, well, hey, I saw 2 packets go by, same port, same IPs within a 30-second period of time. They're probably part of the same communication session. I'm going to go through and I'm going to combine that together. So notice my first 3 are almost a full 24 hours worth of communications here. So if I'm looking for my longest talkers, yeah, this is them right here. So this is something I'm going to want to go in and pay attention to. Now, there's some limitations here. We're looking at the greatest amount of time used by a single session. What's also interesting to us is cumulative time. And I'll give you a great example, and I have it here on the slide as well. So imagine I have a system that's beaconing once per hour. So if I look at this from a beacon perspective, there's only 24 beacons in an hour. So that's not too many, 24 connections. And what it's doing is it connects out to the C2 server, holds the session open for an hour, and then it shuts it down. And then it creates a new session. Well, if I think about that, there's only 24 beacons taking place. So it's not going to raise to like my top talker standpoint. Further, none of the sessions last longer than an hour. So it may not blip the radar as far as the long connection goes. But if I go in and I sum together all those connections, I'll end up with a cumulative communication time of 24 hours. That's now interesting to me. And this does not show that. This is just, unique session and that's it. So what I would have to do, excuse me, in order to calculate that, is I would have to go back through and first sort on source IP, then sort on the destination IP. So now all communications between IP peers are clumped together. And now I would have to sum the duration of all of those. So anytime the IP, source IP, destination IP match, I'm going to want to sum that to the, to the previous session as well. That'll give me my cumulative time. I couldn't think of a really easy, simple way to script that to make life easy for folks. So I just went in and said, yeah, okay, that's something you can go in and kind of play around with yourself if you want to. So again, just keep in mind, we're looking at long connections. We want to be able to get the cumulative as well. This isn't going to give you that, but with a little bit of, Perl or Python, you could probably make that happen. Okay, so going back to our top talkers, our beacon-like, let's take a look at the first one first. So this 88.2 talking to 88.15. It was on DNS. So I want to drill into that one a little bit further. Zeek creates a DNS.log file. So I went in and I just said, okay, go into that log file, and I want to extract out the source IP, destination IP, what was the DNS query that took place, what was the query type, and then I said, only show me instances where this IP address and this IP address appear. So again, I already know that 192.168.88.2 talking to 165.227.88.15 was one of my top communication sessions. So I want to see what was all that traffic that was being passed back and forth between those two systems. Here I pumped it through head just so that you could see some output, but all of this stayed on the screen at the same time. But look what we got here. So it's querying, that's an odd fully qualified domain name, isn't it? It certainly does not look like something a human would assign. You know, in other words, it's not www or mail or, you know, something. We usually use descriptive names when we name our hosts, and this is not descriptive. This is in fact a C2 channel. So what we've got is to the right side of the line, this is a unique identifier that allows the C2 server to identify which compromised host is currently communicating in. I might, you know, as a bad guy, I might compromise 6 different systems on your internal network. They're all coming out through a NAT device. So I can't look at the source IP address and use that to figure out, you know, which compromised system is talking to me, because there's 6 of them that'll be using the same source IP. So I need some other way to distinguish between those six different systems. Imagine one of them is a finance machine and the others are, you know, support or something like that. And I want to give control specifically to the finance machine only because that's, hey, that's where the money is. I need a way to address that machine directly. This code is what would allow me to do that. So that would allow me to, you know, do my marching orders to that one specific system. And then to the left side of the red line, that's just incrementing the query to make sure it doesn't get stuck in the local resolver. Also notice, these are text queries. They're not A record queries or quad A record queries. It's not evil to use text, but it is kind of odd. The only time you really see text being used these days is if somebody's doing a DNSSEC request. So I want to, excuse me, I want to copy your public key so I can validate you're the DNS server that you should be. And that doesn't seem to be what's happening here. So again, lots of weird stuff here, but it makes it real easy to figure out, yeah, hey, this is command and control. So we had Suricata go through and check this system. Check this file to look for command and control. It found nothing. Notice with Zeek, we were able to find this pretty quickly just by, you know, doing some command line manipulation. Now, our second biggest one that had about, you know, a little over 20,000 connections was 1055.210 talking to 172.16.200.11. Now, notice both of these are private addresses. So when I'm doing threat hunting, I tend to ignore private address to private address. And the reason for that is there's so much weird traffic internally. It's so bursty. It's just the false positive rating goes up through the roof. So when I go looking for command and control, I specifically target internal to external only, and that's it. But this showed up in our results, so I wanted to go in and take a look at this anyway. And notice what's happening here. I'm seeing a range of different queries that are taking place. Some of them are part of the same domain, but I'm not seeing, you know, this is evil, and you can look at the queries being done and see why. This looks like I've got an internal system. This might be my local resolver that goes out and resolves these queries for me. And this is just the information I'm interested in looking up at any given time. So this looks normal to me. So from a, you know, 0, it's safe, 100, it's not. This communication session, 0 for this system. This is normal DNS communications. All right, so we also had some TCP 443 traffic taking place. So I wanted to go in and take a look at that. So first, for that, we have a, excuse me, for that, Zeek has an SSL.log file we can go through and do. There's also an X509 log file that has some interesting information in it as well. But for what we needed, you can get it right out of the SSL file. So here I went in and I just grabbed 2 different IP addresses again in order to be able to see only traffic associated with this communication session. And notice what came back. I got back what looks like a legitimate certificate for this fully qualified domain name right here. Here's who the certificate was issued to. So it's a wildcard certificate issued by Microsoft. Windows.com is obviously a Microsoft domain. This one looks pretty legit to me. Now, if the hash didn't match, if it was expired, or if there was anything wrong with it, that would actually show up in this output as well. Zeek can go through, if you tell it to, Zeek will go through and validate are the digital certificates okay or not, yes or no. And this one looks like it's okay. So from so imagine this is a beacon or a long, so this one was a long connection, but imagine even if it was a beacon, and I'm trying to figure out, is this necessary? Is this something I need to trust? If it's an SSL TLS session and there's a digital certificate involved and that digital certificate looks valid, and it's something I recognize and can explain away, like, yeah, this is probably, a Windows lookup type of thing. Again, threat score of 0 to 100, yeah, this brings it to 0. Now, the interesting one is this second one. So this was our longest long connection that was taking place between this IP to that IP. Notice when I went in and I grabbed that one out of SSL.log, nothing comes back. What that tells me is that no digital certificate was exchanged. Now, when you see this, don't freak out right away. There's a couple possibilities. One is this is a long connection. We saw it was running for almost 24 hours. It's possible, imagine I'm looking at yesterday's data. It could be this connection was established 2 days ago, and that's when the digital certificate went by, because it only happens at the beginning of the SSL of the TLS session. So it may have actually exchanged something. This capture didn't see it. I would have to go into the previous day's data and do this exact same search to see, hey, is there a digital certificate here? And if so, do I trust that endpoint? What does it look like it's going on? But if I see nothing, like I see here, let's say, nope, there's no data from the previous day. This is all there is. This tells me someone's going over TCP 443, which is normally SSL TLS traffic. No digital certificate means it's not SSL or TLS. Somebody's tunneling. Again, it's not uncommon for most environments to permit outbound TCP 443 traffic with no controls. They don't run it through a proxy. They don't even bother doing IDS on it because, hey, it's encrypted. It's not like we can match on anything anyway. So because it tends to get ignored, that's one of the reasons why they'll pick that first to try and tunnel. SSH ports are common as well, but not nearly as common as TCP 443 for the exact same reason. So no digital certificate, again, that 0 is it safe, 100 is it evil? This is leaning towards evil for me. I need to do some more research. Did it exchange a certificate the day before, yes or no? But if there's no digital certificate here, oh yeah, I am really suspicious of this connection now. This is something I got to look into. Now, went back one. There we go. So we have two possibilities here that we found. The first one was this. So we went in, we looked at who was our top talkers. We went to the top of the list. We found one. It had this pattern within the DNS.log file. So this is one of our beacons. This is one of our C2 channels. We then went in and looked at this, and I can tell you there was no digital certificate that was exchanged here. This is our other possible C2 channel that we need to take a look at. So we want to dig a little bit deeper now. We found some persistent connections that we can't explain away as having a legitimate business need. So we want to dig into them further. What do we do next? Well, now we're into endpoint reputation. So I gave you a bunch of sites you could use to kind of look up external IP addresses. Are they unknown, blacklists, threat intel lists? Have they been known to act suspicious in the past? So you can do those queries. Do some internal investigation on the internal system as well. That would be a good idea. So we'd want to go in and would kind of want to dig into it from there. But I also wanted to show you another tool, which is RITA. So this is our open source tool. And this tool is specifically designed to help you go in and identify command and control on your network. And what I did is I took the logs that were created by Zeek and just imported them directly into RITA. So RITA is designed to take bro/Zeek logs, ingest them directly, and then use that information to figure out, is there any C2 traffic there? So normally what I may do is I may have Zeek running, collecting these log entries, and then I just have a process ingest that into RITA on a regular basis, and then go in and analyze the data that comes out of RITA. So with RITA, I went in and I asked RITA, hey, show me any beacons that you may have detected in this data set that we created, thunt-lab. And when it did, it spit out this output here. I said, only show me the first 10 lines. Anything, so this very first column is the most important column because this is the percentage chance of what you're looking at being a beacon. Well, not percentage, it's the scale is 0 to 1. So times it by 100 and it would be a percentage. So our first two here scored a 1. So from on a 0 to 1 scale, they scored a 1. We're 100% certain this is a beacon. So remember with Zeek, we could look at quantity of traffic. We couldn't look at beacons. We needed to, use like the R statistic tools to go in and figure that out. And even then, it's still fuzzy. RITA will go through and do that for you. In fact, we had 3 of them that were in the over 20,000 connections in a day range, and this automatically ignored one of them. Remember we had one that was we figured out, oh yeah, that's just DNS traffic talking to a local resolver. RITA already figured out, yeah, no, that's not a beacon. It's kind of bursty. It doesn't look programmed in. Don't worry about that one. It's probably it's off this list of 10 someplace. So it focused in on these first 2, which are the 2 that we looked at that we said, yeah, this is something we need to worry about. Notice RITA just tagged this right away. So if I'm collecting bro logs each day, running RITA at night, coming in the morning, going in and looking at this file, and I could even write a script to say, hey, if this first value is greater than, is 0.9 or greater, I'll put that, and that's something I want to go in and pay attention to. And now I've got a couple of IPs showing me source IP, destination IP, number of sessions that were seen. Now I've got some information I can use to go in and start digging in on this further. RITA will also do a long con analysis as well. So RITA will go through and identify, hey, so here I told RITA, show long connections in this data set that I created. Show me the first 10 line entries. Cool. So here's our source IP, destination IP. Here's the port it was talking to. Here's the transport that was used, the application layer. I'll come back to that in a second, and then the amount of time. So again, we were able to get this out of Zeek. So you could get it out of Zeek directly, or you could use RITA to go through and get it. What I kind of like about what we did with RITA is notice that I didn't have to do a second pass or do any digging to figure out, did the application layer make sense? In other words, if I recognize this is a well-known port, TCP 80, TCP 22, whatever the case may be, I should see the correct associated application with it. So TCP 443 is always going to get identified as SSL. SSL in Zeek speak is just a generic identifier. This could have been a TLS session, and it's still going to get labeled as SSL, and that's fine. At least I know the application layer made sense for this well-known port. But notice we've got a bunch of instances here where it's a dash. And what the dash means is it didn't recognize the application. I mentioned this, I think, 2 weeks ago when we were talking about tools. One of the cool things that Zeek does is for every communication session it sees, it runs through all of its protocol analyzers. So if you take network time protocol and run it over a TCP 443, it will look at that and it will figure out that's network time protocol. It doesn't label it the application name based on the well-known port. It does it based on the data that's actually going back and forth, which is awesome. So that makes our lives a whole lot easier. So again, I've got a long connection that took place here. I don't understand the application layer. Now I know, yeah, this is one I got to dig into and pay more attention to. DNS analysis. So we went in, we did it manually with Zeek, but there's actually, RITA will go through, and because C2 is so commonly found across DNS, RITA will do an analysis of the DNS as well and flag anything for you that you need to pay attention to. So notice when I look at the first 8 lines of output in RITA. So I told RITA, explode the DNS, show me all the DNS information. It starts off showing you summaries of all the domains that you talk to, and then gets into the details of each unique query that took place. So let's start up here at the top. So it's showing me summaries for all of my domains. This is cool, because remember we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. We talked about for most domains, they're going to expose maybe a dozen fully qualified domain names to the internet, and that's it. I'll have a web server, a customer portal, DNS server, some whatever. I'm probably going to have like less than 12. And then we said, then you'll get into large companies everyone's heard of that are offering internet-based services like Akamai, Amazon, Microsoft, and you might see a couple hundred out of them. I think I mentioned once I've seen 800. Usually it's in like the 400 range. So we said the magic number is 1,000. If it appears like there are more than 1,000 fully qualified domain names within a domain, that's probably C2 communications that's taking place. You need to dig into that. So what RITA is telling us is for this domain here, r-1x.com, it saw 62,000 unique fully qualified domain names and 109,000 queries that took place. Okay, 62,000, bigger than 1,000. There go. I need to go in and I need to pay attention to this one. It also breaks out the subs as well, as you can see here. So yeah, this one is definitely worth paying attention to. And then after that, I can quickly see Akamai Edge. These start making sense. Akamai Edge with 154 hosts, yeah, that makes sense. ACDNS.net 125 hosts, yeah, that makes sense as well. So, the rest of these look okay. That first one though, yeah, that looks like C2 over DNS. That looks like something we need to pay attention to. And again, here are the host names down here. So these look a little different than what we saw before. This may be a different portion of the communication channel that we're looking at here. But there's still those repeating patterns that we were talking about. And you can still look at that name and say, yeah, no, a human did not name that. Some human did not sit down and think, this was a name I will remember when I try to get to this system in the future. Yeah, it didn't happen. So one last thing I wanted to do was to walk you through what does this look like with our tool? In other words, if you're using AI Hunter, what does this look like? Again, just a couple slides to kind of walk you through now that you kind of identify the process. One of the things you'd get is alerting. So what we do is the tool does the hunting for you. So these manual steps we were just talking about, even with like RITA, to go through and figure out is there C2 traffic, AI Hunter actually goes through and does that for you. And this is actually one of our what I think is a really cool feature. Because when you think about our security alerts, one of two things tend to happen. We either see the same alert over and 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 over again, and we get to a point where we just decide, okay, I'm going to just ignore that. We're not going to pay any attention to it anymore. Or the alert goes off once, and that's it. And oops, if you missed it, then you're probably not going to know that your network just got pwned. What we do is we go through and we identify, we're going in and evaluating the system every 2 hours based on the previous 24 hours worth of data. So imagine this system sitting on our network, 157.230, blah, blah, blah. This is sitting on our network. It's in an uncompromised state. It's working fine. And then somebody comes by and compromises that system. Well, what would you expect to see in like the first hour or two after the compromise takes place? Well, you're going to start seeing some suspicious traffic, right? Well, that's what happens here. It used to have a threat score below 90. Now it's just stuck its head up above that threshold that was defined. Now, another 2 hours go by. So now I've got about 4 hours worth of data of the system acting suspiciously. Well, we increase the score. Another 2 hours after that, increase the score again. So notice that from here, when we got compromised, to here, just 8 hours later, that threat score is more than double. So here's a situation where, imagine I've got an alert, I've got a screen in my SOC that's identifying, hey, what systems look like they're a threat. If I see a IP address's threat score continue to increase, every other hour for I'd say 4 to 6 hours max. If I see it in over that period of time, yeah, that's a system I got to go in and pay attention to. So no one-time alerts, no the same thing over and over again, so that you just start ignoring it. If you're seeing the threat score slowly climb up like that, yeah, you got to go in and pay attention to it. This is the main dashboard. The left-hand side, this is your action item list. This top IP, this is the IP you're most suspicious of within your environment. And then the numbers go down from here. All of these have a high score assigned to them just because this is test data set. Your score should be lower than that. But, from a what IP address do I need to pay attention to first? Oh, that's this one here. Okay, once I'm done with that one, what do I pay attention to next? Oh, that would be this IP address here. Now, why did we think this was a threat to your network? Well, that information's over here. We were pretty certain it was a beacon. What else? There was it exchanged some data with a blacklisted system. There's a lot of text queries taking place, and it has a rear signature versus other systems on your network. That combined to a score that, added up higher than the rest of the systems on your network. This is why we thought you needed to pay attention to this. Now, you want to drill into any of this stuff, you can just click on these links and that'll bring you in and let you do an identification on that system. So for example, if we say, hey, we were 100% certain that that this system was beaconing, and that's why we think it's suspicious, you can click on that and say, okay, show me why you thought it was a beacon. And we'll show you, okay, here's the 24 hours worth of data. If I can draw a flat line here, we're seeing the same number of queries taking place every hour, a very repetitive pattern. Yeah, that's kind of the epitome of a beacon. So again, we try to make that type of analysis easier. Also, when we just went through and talked through this, we looked at identifying beacons based on timing. Excuse me, we talked about that being hard. What's even harder is doing it based on session size. In other words, comparing the size of each session as it goes through and see if it matches. Because when it does, yeah, it's a pretty good indication that I've got a command and control channel. We do that analysis for you too. And what's kind of neat about that is when you look at your typical C2, you're going to see the smallest number of bytes being transferred. That's going to be your biggest peak. And that's because that's your call home, hey, do you have anything for me to do? No, go back to sleep. That tends to be a fairly small command set. So it's the smallest number of bytes that's going to get exchanged from one side to the other. Now, if you look up here, right around 300 bytes, notice I got a single data point here. This tells me over the 24-hour period of time this was activated. So, with AI Hunter, we're not only telling you, hey, you've got a C2 channel you need to worry about, we're telling you, hey, you have a C2 channel you need to worry about. It was activated in the previous 24 hours, and we don't know what data was exchanged, but it resulted in 300 bytes being transferred. Well, that kind of helps me identify, I know it was probably some querying, some sort of data collection off of the local machine, like what processes are running, what IP address is assigned, versus, they installed an additional rootkit on there or something along those lines, which would have created a much larger file size than that. We give you summary information here on that system. If I wanted to know the reputation of this IP address, I can click on it. We give you a bunch of different sources to go out and research that. So we've tried to make everything, in one spot, easy to kind of go through. Long connections, yeah, we show you that too. So here's my longest connection on the network that we were looking at earlier. Here it is here. Notice we're also identifying right on the line, hey, we don't understand the application layer. This is something worth paying attention to. The one unique thing we do is we also show you a cumulative. So notice that here, I had a 5-hour threshold set. So I said, I'm only interested in long connections that took place that were 5 hours or longer. And when we looked at that, AI Hunter came back and said, okay, I got 3 pages of information to show you. Now, if I go to view 2 here, this is cumulative time. So this is the 2 IP addresses over multiple sessions talking to each other. Notice I now have 11 pages worth of data to go through and take a look at. So I might have, again, that beacon once per hour for a whole hour period of time. I might have some of those mixed in here that's worth going in and taking a look at. So you don't have to do math. You don't have to write any Perl or Python. It's just built right into the tool to work that way. The DNS analysis, same type of thing. So, we were talking about if you see a lot of hosts within a domain, more than 1,000 and you don't recognize the name, yeah, that's worth paying attention to. We definitely flag that for you. But one other thing we do that's kind of cool here is we also do an analysis on, before we were talking about like Akamai Edge, and we said, 154 hosts existed there. And, there was 27,000 queries that took place. Well, if I think about this logically, if 27,000 queries took place, that was probably more than one internal system. It's probably a bunch of my internal systems doing lookups. So I would expect to see multiple hosts doing a direct connection in this domain. And for a normal environment like this, yeah, I'll see a full list of hosts here. I'll see everybody that queried any host within that domain on my network. Awesome. Notice what I have here, though. There's only one system doing any type of direct connections, and it's the one actually sending the queries to the DNS servers. What that tells me is somebody's doing a ton of lookups within this domain, but then they're never actually visiting that domain. Well, that makes no sense, right? Why look up that fully qualified domain name if you're not actually going to go there? So that did not happen here. So again, that's just kind of another layer you can go through to validate, yeah, is this in fact C2 traffic? If you're querying a bunch of hosts in a domain, but nobody ever visits any of those hosts, yeah, you're looking at C2. You know, something bad's going on. And if you want to see more on A Hunter, type demo in chat and we'll get back to you. We can set up a time to go through and give you a full product walkthrough, or feel free to just go through and drop me an email. And on that note, Mr. Strand, have you joined us yet? I don't see him
yet, Chris.
Yeah, I don't see him yet either. I don't see him yet either. Let me see if we can get him to join in really quick. I'm just going to drop him a quick note.
If anyone has any questions at this point, feel free to ask.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Especially since it's last class. So it's kind of like, you know, toss it in now.
Question, how can we view past? So the way you can view past is we will send out a link to everyone that's registered for any of the webcast, and we will send a link with all of the recorded webcasts available, including the materials, the slides, and everything.
Yes. Yeah, we've been recording the audio. So you'll have the full audio recording. And as Jason said, we're going to make the slides available. You've got the PCAP file that I created. So yeah, if this is something you decide a little bit from now, hey, yeah, I want to go back through that again, or hey, we've hired somebody new and want to put them through it, yeah, go for it.
So give us about 5 days from this actual recording. And if you're watching the recording now, then you can go to the link that we'll have available in the description.
Perfect. Perfect. Yeah, we want, and I don't think we have all the previous videos posted yet. We wanted to, but then Black Hat. So anybody else got any questions? All right. One thing I'm going to do, just in case Mr. Strand does not have time to join us today, is I'm going to throw this link into the chat as well. So this is for the webcast tomorrow. I was talking to John about what he's actually going to cover in the webcast tomorrow. And oh my God, it's awesome. So what he's done with Sysmon is, or if you're not familiar with Sysmon, it's a tool that allows you to go through and monitor running processes on your Windows system. Cool, cool. You can also identify what applications are holding open specific ports or opening outbound ports on that system. Well, this now becomes really cool. So we were just going through identifying, you know, is there C2 traffic, yes or no? And we identified 2 different IP addresses that we said, yeah, this internal host is suspicious. Well, if it's a Windows system and I'm running Sysmon and I can push this out via group policy, I can actually record what applications are creating outbound connections. So if I go in and I look at that and I say, oh yeah, that's C2, you know, connecting to that DNS port, this gives me an audit log to identify what application on that system actually held open that DNS connection. Oh my God, that's awesome, right? From a forensics perspective, that just makes my life a whole lot easier. You know, what did the box get owned with? Well, I just identified it right there. That's pretty cool. So yeah, if like I said, wanted to get John in here. I got a feeling he's going to have time to join us in time, and that's fine. But he'll be doing the webcast tomorrow. I gave you the link in the chat. Register for that. It's free, but it's a ton of really good, useful information. Anything you see interesting in Black Hat that's relevant to what we did during this training? So I was not at Black Hat. I had other things I was taking care of. From the folks that I was talking to, not really, not that I heard. There was a lot of interesting things that happened in Black Hat. You know, you can always tell when Black Hat's going on just based on like what's hitting major stuff in the news. But I didn't see anything like groundbreaking in this vertical though. So, all right. In that case, thank you everybody. Again, any questions, comments? Please feel free to drop me an email. Let me know. I would greatly appreciate that. Hope everybody got some good information out of this. And yeah, watch the webcast, watch the blogs. We'll be pushing out more information as we go. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.